With those few words, I'll hand over to our first speaker, Zwelinzima Mavhalo.
Well, thank you very much and for having us here, and good morning to everybody present here. Good morning to everybody at home. And before the State of the Nation address, I wrote a piece imagining myself to be in the shoes of President Jacob Zuma. And I, in that address, my own State of the Nation address, articulated the true challenges South Africa is facing today, premised on the fact that South Africa is going through its darkest hour in the first 22 years of democracy. Politically, we are in a deep crisis. Economically, we are in a deep crisis. What a good demonstration of the extent of that crisis last night in the State of the Nation address, where we saw hecklers, where we saw the presiding officers at sea in terms of how they will interpret the rules of the House, where we saw everything that South Africa is unfortunately is at this particular moment in our history. And I was saying to myself, this demonstration of this crisis is what we see in our daily lives in the country. What we saw yesterday was the physical fights between the ANC members, the physical battles between the alliance formation, KwaZulu-Natal. What we saw was the chaos in the Petro SA, the chaos in the South African Post Office, the chaos in Eskom, and the chaos everything. But more importantly, what we saw yesterday was a breaking down of the trust, which is such an important ingredient for any working society everywhere else in the world. I maintain that the trust, the contract that should exist between any government and its people has been broken. And that yesterday was offering the president yet another opportunity to rebuild that trust. And in my view, he simply dramatically failed to inspire the nation that in the context of the crisis we saw, there can be a way forward. The speech was one of the most boring, repetitive, in that everything that was said, there is something that I have heard over and over again, demonstration of policy incoherence, and unfortunately the government does no longer know its ideological stance. It doesn't know whether it is speaking from the left or from the right. One sentence, it appears to be speaking to the ordinary people in the street, the working class and the poor. The next sentence is speaking to the international investors. The next sentence is not speaking to anyone. It's something in between. And if I was a worker, unemployed, because 20 million South Africans were unemployed, 20 million of our people who are younger, unemployed, listening to that, somebody would have said that I don't have a hope in the damn next 20 years under these circumstances that my crisis is going to be resolved very soon. Not speaking in any way as a leader of a country in such a deep ocean, and it confirms the point that I was making. That's what I will say as an unemployed, that indeed a deep ocean in a very dark night. And unfortunately, the captains, all of them have been blindfolded, and they don't have any compass at hand. And they don't know whether the ship is moving left, right, center, upward, south, west, east. But we can see that the ship is moving towards an iceberg. And that's what my view will be as an unemployed person in this country. If I was an investor waiting to be inspired to spend the 1.5 trillion rands that big business is keeping in their banks, I would have not been inspired to want to spend a single cent more in the South African economy, which clearly have no plan about how we're going to bank in addition to the Reserve Bank tell us that our growth is going to be below 1%. So my view overall, the crisis remains and distrust have even deepened. South Africa have been tranquilized by unkept promises, and you will never Thank you.
Certainly, thank you. Yeah, this blindfolded captain with no compass. I think it's a very good image of our government today. Susan, over to you.
Thank you very much, Malik, and good morning, everybody. Good to be here, and I look forward to our discussion too. Last night gave us evidence that the times are changing. And I focus here mostly on politics and the policy. The times are changing. We saw a president who gave the signals. He had quite a few phrases to suggest that he has been listening. Between the lines, he seemed to say, we have heard the critics, we have heard the business community speaking out in a series of engagements. He said, we have heard COSATU and Labour in terms of the tax amendments. Elephant in the room, his own ANC caucus, people in the executive who have been betrayed in a way. Just a few days ago in the Constitutional Court, we had turned around and said, forget about all these Nkandla reports, and this is now, I'm looking out for myself, I'm rescuing myself, embarrassment all around. The applause yesterday, in yesterday's speech, being very acutely aware of that. It was so canned, and it came at the most inappropriate moments. It was as if his own ANC audience, they're obviously the ones who are applauding, didn't even know what is new. Perhaps they have just shut themselves off entirely the last few years, stopped critically engaging. Perhaps they didn't know what was new, that some things that they applauded were 2-3 years in the coming. And perhaps they wanted to give a signal to their own president that they really do not take his message. That was the feeling that I got from the ANC benches there. And if one gets that from the president's governing party, a party that I believe clearly doesn't know how to relate to its president anymore, apart from the fact that I do have heard from very good sources that he has definitely been told, you will be allowed to see out your term, but do not push your luck. Start clearing out the office. When your term is done, it will be done. Unless, of course, there is another nanny gate, then that process could really be put fast forward. But this is politics, and this was a State of the Nation address. So I think we have to listen out for the small signals of a president admitting, yes, the times have been changing. I have not got the power that I used to have even a few months ago, even if this is my last term, and even if people have been referring to me as a lame duck for quite some time. So the signals are small. The president was absolutely not celebratory. He gave indications that he has heard, but he has conceded on several fronts. Of course, if one listens to the nuclear points, there were not really concessions there. It was said, what could be seen as a concession was that he said, we will procure in terms of abilities, affordability, But it was such an ambiguous statement. He did not say, hypothetically speaking, the Russians come in and they build all 9,600. At least I managed to pronounce 9,600. If the Russians come in and say, build it all. Of course, it's affordable to South Africa, but South Africa will repay for the next 100 or 200 years in terms of a crucial field like that. One of the serious questions that we have in there is still corruption, perhaps with the EFF, and I give them a little bit more credit than Moletsi. Perhaps they did bring that balance into the House because the state of the nation is by definition, it is a very one-sided affair. And even if the EFF, I agree, did not do that like true hecklers and brave fighters should do, I really we really should have seen the physical throw out of the chamber. That would have grabbed the headlines big time. That action brought into very sharp perspective the fact that there is a president, and I absolutely agree with Sven Lema, that who has lost the trust, has lost the confidence. And not only, we see this in public opinion polls, both of the president's performance and of trust in South African government institutions. There isn't the election throwing out the ANC, and that is probably one of the greatest weaknesses of the Zuma era, and we saw this illustrated last night. There isn't another party that is ready and sufficiently accepted to step into that government space. And which is what I refer to my own work as deinstitutionalization of South African institutions, institutions of democracy in the time of Zuma. And that is perhaps the most disconcerting aspect, because it is in a time where there is rising populism, a reinvigoration of nationalist sentiment, recognition, consideration of the issue of the compromises that 1994 constitutional settlement brought. And the president also affirmed that it may very well have to revert back to more nationalist, populist, patriotic sentiments again. But last night had many signals that this was a president that was not going to emphasize those points for the time being. I always love counting the number of references to radical in the president's speeches. There was one last night, and it was a little sideways in terms of commitment to radical transformation. In recent years, he has been, and the whole of the ANC has been very clear in trying. Many times they can use that word radical in there. So yes, we see here to conclude this evidence of the times are changing. And it was a very subdued ANC in that assembly last night. It was an ANC who did not know what to make of the members there, who didn't know what to because of his speech and still very uncertain. The struggle continues to get policy clarity and the...
Thank you, Susan. Broken down. Well, now, where is the alternative which the people will trust? Where will it come from? And what will its programs do? So that is my first question for the two of you.
Thank you.
Okay, we have Stambile here who tells me she's a distant relative of the other Mbete. But she says she doesn't mind points of order. So over to you, Stambile.
Thank you very much. Somebody who's a far more direct relative of another person. So the official title for the speech yesterday was Following Up on Our Commitment to the People. And at the end of the speech, it was not quite clear what the commitment was or what follow-up had been given, actually. So I've got 4 comments to make, just as initially. Once the president actually got going after the theatrics, after the first hour, 45 minutes of his speech was about the economy. But in a speech, it was very clearly about the economy. The speech was clearly meant to be structured as a chief executive on aimed or directed at a business audience. But in a speech all about economy, there was very few numbers. Very few numbers, very little detail about the specifics that were being mentioned. So, okay, so we're going to be, we've achieved so much since the announcement of cost cutting in 2013. Well, how much have we actually saved? The Auditor General says last year that there was 25.7 billion of irregular spending. Is that, and it was an improvement on the previous year, but how much of that improvement comes from the measures that were set in place in 2013 that the President responded to, that the President referred to? We want to get rid of 2 capitals, great. But how much will we actually save if we move Parliament to Pretoria? And the numbers are there. The costing has been done of this. And so to mention that and then not to speak about what actually the difference will be is bizarre to me. We're going to save on travel and we're not going to have parties next week. And some of those parties were really nice, actually. Those dinners after the budget speeches. Damn. You know, so we're going to save on those dinners. Great. How much are we going to save? You know, how much Nestle and VW and BMW have stayed. Great. How many jobs did they create by staying? If they've expanded, how much? You know, there was this detail that was missing, and in the budget speech in 12 days. But in terms of giving, I think it would have been really important in terms of showing an authoritative, you know, a president who knows what's going on, who cares about what's going on, who to mention these things and to talk about those numbers. You know, South Africa pays extraordinary, I mean, in the hundreds of millions in debt repayment on interest a day. Those numbers are there. Tell us those numbers and tell us why then you're trying to avoid a ratings downgrade, you know, and make that evident to the people that you've mentioned in your title. So very few numbers in a speech all about the economy. It was interesting that this time around he was playing to business as opposed to the unions, where in previous in previous sonos he's played to the unions and anyone else. And so it'll be interesting to see what that does for the alliance, especially in an election year where it's local government elections and COSATU is important to the ANC for mobilizing and for organizing and for campaigning in an election year. So that'll be interesting to see. And also about the economy, that there was no detail on the sort of, a lot was said, and follow through, what is the process which seems to be going ahead. Third, the health department really shone in the speech yesterday. They seemed like the only department with progress to report. There was actual things like, we said this and this and this, and we've actually done it, and now we're going to do something else. And then as an international relations specialist, I was particularly interested in that there would seem to be a bit of a climb down in relation to the West. That for the first time in a speech of the President, it was the EU is a major trading partner of ours, and we really want to play nice. And you know, we're cooperating with the Americans, we are cooperating with the US on AGOA and in military training, and yes, and we value them. So I thought that was a very interesting addition to this year's SONA. So overall, I mean, it's still not clear exactly how committed the President is to us, the people. But I mean, no surprises anymore, I don't think.
Thank you, Stemi. Well, on the question of commitment to the people, I was once told of an American ruler, a South American ruler, who was visiting the United Nations, and he was asked how the country is doing, and he said the economy is doing very well, but the people are not. So that seems like the attitude of our present government. Over to you, Andrew.
Thank you so much, Babu Mpegi. I'll be brief. Hopefully, before we leave, you can explain to us what actually is a point of order, because last night I was totally lost. Everything that was raised apparently was not a point of order. But Winston Churchill likes to say that a good speech is like a woman's skirt. He says that it should be long enough to cover the subject and short enough to create interest. I think this was long. I certainly lost interest. And unfortunately, as long as it was, it didn't cover any of the real subject, certainly not from a business or economic sense. The president opened in the 45-minute section of the economy by saying, a resilient and fast-growing economy is at the heart of our radical economic transformation and agenda. And he then said, when the economy grows, it delivers jobs, workers earn wages, businesses make profits, tax base expands, allows the government to increase the social wage. It was to me as almost as if he was saying, well, the opposite happens when the economy doesn't grow. Because we are sitting at 0.7% according to the IMF, 0.9% according to the Reserve Bank. I think somebody else came up with 0.8%. So if the economy doesn't grow, first thing is you're not going to get any radical economic transformation. You can't share that which you don't have. There's no jobs that are going to be delivered. Workers' wages, Mr. Vavi, in real terms, post-inflation, are actually going to decrease. Because if I give my staff a 4% increase at 6.5%, 7%, or even 9%, as the Woolworths CEO told me last night, of food inflation, that essentially means that in real terms, that worker is earning less. If business makes less profits or makes losses, obviously the tax base can't collect. That means you can't really fund the infrastructure development that you're talking about. So I was quite confused by him opening with that line and not kind of wanting to show the world that he too and his government understand the economic situation that we're in. You know, so he kind of teed up the ball for me and kind of addressed it and totally missed it. Because his next line was, you know, here are the global factors, what's happening in Brazil, what's happening in Russia, those economies are essentially in a recession. We are struggling as well because what's happening in the globe and what's happening in China. Here are some domestic factors that also influence us. He didn't go into detail on that. Then he talked about the fact that growth is going to be slow. And then he says, well, I will share a few points that we believe would make the difference. Then I was ready, you know. I was like, yes, my president, let's go. Let's talk about the specifics. The first words out of his mouth were, our country remains an attractive investment destination. I sat there and I thought to myself, 0.7% return. If I was that professional from some global bank and I was advising my client to invest, would I tell him to go and put his dollars in an economy that grows 0.7%? Of course not. So my biggest disappointment with the business side of the speech was it felt like the South African government lives in another world. And when there are tough times, we can think of just our personal relationships, whether it's with your husband, your wife, or your family. As you try and deal with them, it's always important that everybody's on the same page that we are going through a difficult time. And that everybody believes that, yes, we're on the same page. How do we then now get ourselves out of it? It felt to me that I was listening to a government that was saying, it's not as bad as you think. We're actually a great global investment destination. We are doing well, etc., etc. Of course, there are places where we are doing well. And I actually think even on those stuff that we're doing well, he could have gotten into more detail. I'm not going to repeat a lot of the points that Stembile has already made. For example, Eskom. 3 years ago, we were in a real mess when it came to answering the question about electricity security. No matter what we say about our SOCs and all the mess that they are in, this company and this government has tried to abate this issue. We've done relatively well given the challenges we have. I think that was something we could have claimed. I think we could have gone into a lot more detail about how far we've come, even though we're not quite where we want to be. But 3 years ago, it was seen as, don't go to South Africa, there's no electricity. And I think we missed the opportunity to kind of hop on the couple of positives we've got. And instead, we missed that, and then we pretended as if the big stuff isn't there. Then I heard about a one-stop shop Invest South Africa initiative. Then I heard about an interministerial committee on investment promotion. As Bob Vavi has already said, the rhetoric, the same thing. Then I heard about we've got to remove red tape. Then I heard about we've got to remove legislative and regulatory blockages. I've been hearing about this for more than a decade.
No, 20 years.
It's about 20 years. It's about time we say, okay, you know, we said we're going to remove red tape 10 years ago. This is how far we've come. These are some of the challenges we've had, and this is how we're trying to fix them. Why do we need another initiative to attract investment? Is this the first time we realize that we as a country need to have a deliberate initiative to attract investment? So I was quite surprised by the way it was positioned. It was as if we've just realized this. So lack of detail for me, speech too long, covered everything in that I was not interested in anything else, but didn't really get into the detail. And the SOCs was also a missed opportunity, but Stembile has already mentioned that. And if we were trying to send a signal to the rating agencies particularly, because I can't stress further, Babon Peki, how important it is that we avert the sub-investment grade. I cannot stress even further, because getting out of it is the hard part. So you don't want to end up in there. And if that's what we were trying to do, I think we failed. I also did not have much faith that the president would say anything that would give them the kind of impetus to say, no, actually, given the update in the State of the Nation that came from the president, perhaps let's rethink. But I was the eternal optimist. I think we as South Africans have learned to be. We've learned to hope for the best. And unfortunately, my worst fears were realized. And the president, I don't believe, did enough to convince the world that we are clear about our challenges. We've made some progress. There's actual numbers I can show you, just like it did on health, on the economy of the progress we've made. We've made progress on electricity security. Yes, we're not there, but we've made great progress. But we are clear about the challenges we have. You're not talking to people who live in Kukuland. It sounded like you were talking to people that didn't understand the challenges they have. And I think that didn't do us good.
Andile, thank you. Well, I'm always being asked who are Jacob Zuma's advisor. I think next time I will send a note to him that I have a 4-person team here which can give him all the advice that he needs. Because certainly his current advisors, whoever they are, very clearly, as we've heard this morning, are not doing a very good job. Anyway, I'll open up the discussion to the floor, and please announce yourself and don't speak too long. Yes, sir.
It's Louis Milka speaking.
Can you hear?
With the poor address that we got from the president, what chance do you think there is of a rerun by the scholars in Soweto of the Soweto riots in order to get proper schooling and opportunities for a better future?
Thank you. There's somebody behind.
Oh,
Yeah,
thank
hold on. Wait.
Thank you. My name is Mandla Pete, MD RMK Projects. It is obvious to all South Africans that the president is not doing well. The issue here is that as business people, as communities, what are we doing to make sure that the president leaves parliament because he's not doing anything for anybody? That is my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Anywhere? Any
Thank
other
you.
question?
Oh,
Yeah.
my name is Cleo Litsiri, a lecturer at Central Johannesburg TVET College. I have one question, but I'll start with a comment. Francis Fukuyama once said, the quality of governance is the real factor that determines whether the country will be rich or poor. But now the question I have, will South Africa ever see commitment to the professionalization of the state bureaucracy so that we can deliver quality services to the poor?
Thank you.
Thanks very much. My name is Advocate Mthusi Tsineng from the Gauteng Provincial Legislature. Firstly, Ndadembek, I want to speak to the panel first. I've got issues for all of them, but in the interest of time, I'll not raise them. I'll raise them outside with them individually. Next time, let's have a panel with people who must not agree, all of us. At least have people with views that are contradicting what you said. That way we'll have a constructive engagement and we can make our minds after that. Now, the panel was agreeing, all of them, on one issue. But the second issue I want to raise is that, is it good for our democracy, our young democracy, to have, all institutions collapsing, where people go having issues, correct or not, but go to parliament and disrupt parliament, where parliament is created for serious engagement, where you can push your policy positions through. I think I will applaud DA for, remaining there, and I know next week they will come with, good issues to raise, be it economic, social, and otherwise. But if you push to the extent that you are pushed outside, what constructive engagement are you going to bring when this speech is debated? Secondly, the issue I want to raise, and it's a problem in South Africa, we don't really understand how our democracy works. Most of the people think, the president must touch on everything at that time. But we're still going to have the budget votes, we're still going to have the Minister of Finance telling us in details what these plans really means, what the president said. But lastly, I think South Africans, all of us, we must learn to respect the authority. There's a general problem that we don't respect the authority, and it will not take us anywhere. I mean, this is a president who was elected by overwhelming majority of South Africans. Now, if you want to remove the president, you can't remove him by campaigning, coming up with Zuma must fall and all that. Go to the polls, vote for another president. Or if you want to make your work easy, join the ANC, go and remove him from inside first. And then after you, because the ANC is in majority. So I think we must really start to think in that direction. But the last point, all of us in Tatembek, in Tatevavis, boys, with these brilliant ideas and minds that we have, we need to start working towards the development of South Africa, all of us, because it's in the best interest of us and generations to come after us. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Just one point of correction. The president was elected by members of parliament, not by the people of South Africa. Anyway.
Thank you.
My name is Samgelo Masego from Jacaranda FM. My question would be based on an article that Moile Tsimpeki once wrote, that COSATU is just nothing but a lame duck that just cries and has no effective change in the policies of the ANC and the government. Now, Mr. Vavi has been the General Secretary of COSATU for more than 16 years, if I'm not mistaken. He was one of the people that elected President Jacob Zuma to where he is today with Malema. Now that they have fallen aside, they want to remove the president in an orthodox method they did not use to propel him through the structures of COSATU and the ANC. How will that effect change now that you are outside the alliance? And you say the president has not mentioned any labor movements to bring them on board here. You are in a process to start your own federation, if I'm not mistaken, that you even pronounced. How is that going to be effective to bring about change? And what is currently happening in this country speaks to how South Africans have become so discontent with the politics of the country to effect change. We are so not united that what is currently happening in Parliament speaks to how we have been lazy and have let politicians run over us. Right now, we are sitting here discussing what is happening in the SONA. What are we proactively doing to change the lives of the ordinary people in the township of Soweto, in the rural areas of Mkungundlovu? People who go beyond and live beyond the poverty line. Most of the panelists there live in luxurious homes. What are you doing to effect change to the ordinary lives out there? Why are we putting the sole blame of what is happening to this country to one man who was propelled by politicians like Zwelinzima Mafafi?
Thank you, sir. Well, I think we have enough comments, questions. I'll start over in the opposite direction.
With me?
And then work my way back.
Oh, man. Wow, thanks for the questions. I'll touch on the ones that relate to the economy, but I'll also touch on some of the broader ones as well. Of course, the budget speech is still coming. Of course, there's going to be more information. Of course, there's going to be more detail. But I think we need to also appreciate as South Africans that let's not make the mistake that somebody who criticizes is necessarily against, or that all criticism is destructive. Sitting here, I can tell you now, everything that I agree with, I always give the credibility that it deserves. But everything I disagree with, I will tell you I disagree. So I don't think we should equate disagreeing with lacking respect or not respecting authority. I think we live in a constitutional democracy. We should be able to give our views. And if we differ, that's fine too. That's the purpose of dialogue. On the issue of communities and people who are sitting on this panel living in luxurious homes, I'm pretty sure we do. I think we also need to always ask ourselves the question, whose job is it to address some of the issues that I think the gentleman raised? And the people that we entrust with this work, to what extent are they accountable to us? Because of course, most of the people in this room, me knowing South Africans, we all do our bit to try and help those who are less fortunate. There's probably very few, typically South Africans because of the history we come from, who don't do enough. I can guarantee you, without all of them answering, there's something they do in their lives that tries to give to those who didn't have the opportunities. But you see, that's not what the people on this panel wake up for every day. There are people, though, that we employ and we pay through our taxes to do that. Those are the people that I would rather be asking that question to. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to touch on, I think, most of the questions that were asked. The first question about what's the chance of new Soweto riots for better schooling, that's the whole of last year. Fees Must Fall was that. I mean, that was students who are at universities, sure, but from all sorts of backgrounds, economically and educationally, saying, well, there's something wrong with the system. There's something wrong with the way things are being done here, and we're going to take our inspiration from those who came before us to try and force government to do things differently. Whether that will have the kind of long-term effect that the 1976 uprising had, which was to really jumpstart liberation politics and activity in South Africa after over a decade of kind of quietness, has yet to be seen. But I think that we're definitely in a moment of serious student activity that I, at least as somebody who works at a university, I'm really happy about. And I think that the students have done remarkable work. I mean, at my own university, the outsourcing, is being phased out over the next 2 years, and it was students that really got that issue on the table, and I think that that's incredible. And so I think that we're in a moment of significant student activity and momentum, and I think that should be celebrated and encouraged. How can business get rid of the president? I mean, I don't think that, and I think that this is the problem with the way in which the EFF protested yesterday and coped to a certain degree. Our problems won't be solved if we get rid of this one man. I know that he is the embodiment of so many of our frustrations, or people's frustrations, but the recall of the president, as we saw with the last one, who's related to someone on the panel, doesn't solve anything, because the country still needs to run, business still needs to go on. And so I think that this focus and this obsession with we need to recall Zuma must fall isn't helpful. And I think that what it also does is that it's preventing it's preventing us from looking at the actual political mechanisms and institutions that we have, and saying, well, what's actually, because there's clearly some sort of blockage, right, about that is preventing the political systems that exist from bringing about real change, from leading to actual dialogue and actual making a difference. Let us try to engage with what is that block instead of saying, well, let's get rid of the dude on top and put somebody else and pray for the best, you know? And so I'm not convinced that the Zuma must fall, that getting rid of the person on top at the moment is going to get us very, very far. On the question on governance, you know, and one of the things that I'm most disappointed about this speech is that there was very an update that hasn't gotten you know, the realization of a professional state bureaucracy is really important, and I think is almost fundamental to achieving many of the goals that we have as a country. And it's weird to me that the president didn't speak much about some of the very obvious successes in there. One of the big things is, I mean, there's a state school of governance that was launched last year. What's going on with that? You know, how is it going? How is it operating? Yeah, I think it was one of those conspicuous absences in the speech. Yeah, and that's actually where I'm going to leave it. I will let the professional hecklers respond to the issues of disruptions and authority.
Thank you, Stanley. Just again, we were accused by the speaker at the back of having panelists, of choosing panelists who agree amongst themselves. I hope you feel better that Stembile has denounced the Zuma Must Fall movement, and here is one of the leaders of that movement. So at least on this one issue, there is disagreement. Over to you, Susan.
Thank you, Mletse. And I'll actually start with your first question as to the insufficiently of current opposition and where that challenge might eventually come from. When I say politics are changing in South Africa, it's not just the governing party. Opposition politics is also changing. But it's a piecemeal type of change we have, and I think that style of change will continue in South Africa. We see progress by opposition parties. DA has been incrementally growing from election to election, and the EFF came in with a very good 6% start, not as good as the COPE start was, but pretty close. Interestingly enough, in subsequent public opinion polls up to late last year, that's the latest statistics that I saw, is that the EFF is growing faster than other opposition parties at this stage. Of course, it was too long before a next election in order to filter that 13% support that it got in a national opinion poll, a credible one, to filter that by, are you registered to vote and do you intend voting? Closer to elections, polling companies start doing that. So party political opposition is changing. And the new parties are forming and possibly forming, and I will leave that to better experts than me to inform us about that. We know there are very slow starts, for example, around United Front and whether a NUMSA-related party might be emerging. That is going to be very interesting when that starts happening, because the EFF in the 2014 national elections, provincial elections, for example, got a large chunk, especially in the Northwest, of their support from workers and from mine workers, from Marikana areas, from in the Rustenburg municipality. And whether those chunks of left of the ANC support can start cohering to form a bigger mass, or whether they will be eating into one another's support bases. That is a very big question that's going to be faced in due course. And here, and so far we have the EFF, and they are making points that actually articulate, not just with what a few panelists might say, but with what large chunk of South Africans are saying about trust in institutions and give respect to institutions, respect to the Constitution and many other institutions of democracy where it is deserved. I think Parliament is very well respected. Why do all the opposition parties and the big governing party get themselves elected to Parliament? It is not an authoritarian forum where one opinion rules. That is a forum for engagement. Is it not the hugest possible sign of disrespect not to challenge, not to debate, not to interrogate everything that is being said there? I think that, and that our own governing party is very often guilty of, not just in Parliament, but also in provincial legislatures and municipalities, not to interrogate their own leaders, not to ensure that voters actually do get represented instead of primarily what is the interest of a certain party. Is that interest the same as unemployed South Africans' interest, as employed, engaging South Africans' opinions? All those opinions need to be reflected in those institutions for those institutions to get respected and to be able to function well. And the same goes for the state bureaucracy. That was one of the biggest serious silences in yesterday's speech. Corruption and cronyism, except when the Zupta must fall issue came about and there was a little bit of articulation about big issue of waste functions. If we take away the functions, several of the big government departments will hardly function. I know the Ministry of Women's Affairs has got a reputation of being the Department of Functions. That is a big thing. That is outreach. Those are occasions, especially in pre-election times, where community engagement is being affected. So corruption and cronyism was a big, big issue. Local government, we're entering this year of local government elections. There are tens of thousands of points of procurement in local government where things go wrong, obviously in other spheres of government as well. We need a professionalization of the public service in order to address that. But that is not how politics work in current South Africa. Those patronage networks are a massive part of politics, and especially of local politics, and that's why we see the nomination wars currently in which some people are getting killed just because they want to be councillors and because there's very good business associated with being a councillor or possibly with other levels of representation. So that is probably one of the biggest challenges that we're facing, to get that professionalization. The fact that we need that does not mean I see progress towards achieving that. There are corruption commissions, there are disciplinary actions, but the scale of that so far does not nearly match the problem. That is where the big turnaround strategy, a convincing one, a widespread one, is required. It might be very difficult for the ANC to implement that, but doing that and cutting its losses in the shorter term might mean that they can secure a longer term one. Otherwise, the gradual momentum of opposition might become faster. Swelenzima, you will be the expert on that.
No, I'm not. Let me just say, in response to lots of questions, very good questions that have come through in the table, just connect the issues that are being raised with my other comments I wish to offer about the yesterday's State of the Nation address. One person is asking here whether we're going to be seeing riots in Soweto. And that makes me to remember that the South African police have issued statistics last time about the service delivery protests and they tell us that in 2013 alone, there were 14,700 service delivery protests in South Africa. And that's about 50 a day. And they say, the police, not me, they say 5% of these service delivery protests turn violent. Because the people have now been psyched into believing that unless you ban something, tire in the streets, blockade, the mayor, the minister, the premier will not come to hear you. You're asking about whether riots are coming. I once said that already Johannesburg is surrounded by a ring of fire. And the problem, and the reason why we choose to ignore that, is that these are the poorest of the poor, desperately trying to bring attention of the nation to their plight. They can't phone 702, they can't phone power station, they will not be in the talk shows of SABC. They're far too poor to have money to phone. They can only send a please call me, which will not be responded to. And then we can then claim that we speak, all of us, informal settlement. Or we never part of any service delivery ourselves. We see this as just statistics. And this is this point that I want to raise basically. The extent of denialism on the part of the State of the Nation address yesterday, and denialism comes from the fact that you have no solution. The only way when you have no solution is to push your head deep under the sand and hope that the problems will solve themselves. And that's what we saw yesterday. Commission after a commission, a task team after a task team, a claim that state-owned enterprises are working well, a claim that our economy is resilient. Where we live from, you know, this ivory tower politics is absolutely a dangerous phenomenon in South Africa indeed. When you live somewhere and the windows are too dark, and you come walking in 2 days in some township, and then you think that that's sufficiently in touch with the people, is always going to be the problem. The disconnect between the rulers and the ruled is such a proportion that it will create a huge problem. And that's where the problem of trust comes from. You speak on our behalf, you don't even connect with us. Yesterday, there was just this lack of empathy with the poor coming from the State of the Nation address. Not a single word to assure the 34% population that is unemployed that we are with you, you know, we know what we are going through. No talk about the extent to which the middle strata and the working class, and now increasingly yourselves in business, are so overwhelmed by the problem of indebtedness, and that how ordinary people are just struggling every day to get the ends to meet. No talk to the 13, 14 million people who go to bed every night without anything to eat. Disconnect with that. The reason why you would not speak to those people, because you know that you will offer no tangible solution to the crisis that they are facing. Now let's talk about just a few things about these authority questions that have been thrown to us and the respect. Yes, all of us must respect, all of us must guard against the collapse of the institutions, because no one in this country will want to see a total chaos where there is just no authority, no law, and order, nothing. Everything falls apart. It is not in the interest of anyone for us to achieve that type of a situation. But here is the point that we make. These disruptions yesterday, these demonstrations, and you're saying you want to teach some people about how you become a heckler. And I said this is a demonstration of the state of affairs in our country, unfortunately. The same State of a Nation address happens in the same week where the lawyers of the president would have gone to the Constitutional Court to make an admission that the president is in breach of his own oath and that he has broken the constitution of the land. Which bigger lack of respect of authority and institution is greater than that? Respect is not shouted in the rooftops. Respect is earned on a daily basis. You can't just say, I decree that you're now all going to respect my authority. No, you earn that every day. And unfortunately, the president has not earned any respect, worst of all, this week. And secondly, I said in my little speech where I was imagining myself as a leader of a country facing the type of the crisis in this proportion, I said that the people who are saying Zuma must fall are wrong. They are missing the point. That's where I agree with you. You cannot say that this crisis is because of one person anymore. This is the crisis of the entire cabinet. For the question will arise in the cabinet. Decided to kick a Chapter 9 on the mouth to start a new investigation on the Ngadla question and then present that as the authority above a Chapter 9 institution, which was actually a breach of oath on the part of each one of them. When they were playing that bioscope about a fire pole, what was inside their conscience? When they said that the Gupta thing is just some few people who were jealous, why didn't they ask a question, which white company, as I was asking the other day, which white CEO can do what Gupta is reported to be doing into this country every day? Which white CEO, let's play the race card for a moment. Which white CEO have ever asked residents to agree that they, as the powerful company, will build a helipad in their house and that the residents must accept that there will be a noise from a helicopter every morning and afternoon when they go to work and come back? Which South African can land a helicopter in the zoo? Which South African can arrange that their family friends use the water glove to land there and be whisked away by 2011 traffic cops to some private wedding? Why are we allowing these things to happen and then claim to have any moral authority? That's why my point is, not one person must go. The collective in the cabinet must live together with the president. And secondly, every member of the National Executive Committee, certainly those who have been giving him a round of applause and providing him with the protection when South Africa was crying out for leaders of moral authority, must go with him. And I think that at this particular point, that call must be made, because if we don't, then 50 years down the line, when things start to fall apart and that we are fully squarely in the terrain of a banana republic, our children will ask us, where were you? Did you raise your voice? When one family could bully, and when ministers themselves, Mbalula told this country that he was told by the Guptas that he's going to be appointed as the Minister of Sport. And indeed, that happened. Where else does that happen? Where is the ANC? Where is the leadership when that happens? Come on, guys. Why are we denying? Why are you on denial? When things are falling apart right in front of us. I'm not part of those. To me, I agree with you, Kubalo. When something is right, like the scorecard on healthcare, I said, that's it. We're moving in the right direction in the fight against HIV and AIDS. The pharmaceutical company is a good step on condition that we're not going to be imposed another family-linked person to run it down. I will applaud that. But when things fall apart, I will not be afraid to stand up and say, that's it. You are going wrong there. That's not what we promise our people. And I have, from my example, my leader from the Jacaranda, I have been a general secretary for about 14 years of the Federation. And no one, very few people will debate on the detail about the policy direction of this country from 1994. Not as a spectator. I've been there myself. I know exactly what missed opportunities we had at what point, and I know exactly when we turned to the West. So yes, I backed the president not as an individual. I backed certain ideals, and yesterday I went back to look at what was the State of the Nation address offering in 2009. And I read all of the 11 points. And I read again 2010, when in my view things started to go wrong. And I read again the 2015. And I saw what I'm now referring to as the policy zigzagging, the incoherence in policy, the refusal to take a line at the political level and pursue a line that will be unpopular here for the following reasons, but will be popular here. And I was saying yesterday to the CNBC Africa, you cannot serve a sheep and a lion in the same kraal at the same time. It's a mission impossible. You've got to stand for something. And unfortunately, the State of the Nation address yesterday doesn't stand for anything. And that's why the business community is not happy. That's why the labor movement is not happy. That's why the students are not inspired about whether their crises are going to be resolved through a commission of inquiry. That's why nobody is happy. You've got to stand for something. You either this or not this, that's it. You can't be everything to everybody. You're going to fail. I'm done.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Zweli, thank you very much. Well, according to the timetable, we are already running out of time. This is a working room for the university, so we have to vacate it by 9 o'clock. Yeah, okay, we can't go for another round of questions. Because according to the timetable, I don't know if you've seen it, we have to finish at 10 to 9.
Okay.
Okay, but let's just take the three then who are there.
Morning, everyone. My name is Daniel Molokele. I'm a Pan-African. I just wanted, maybe since there's no time, it's something for all of us to take away home. Not just the panelists, but everyone in this room. I feel like I'm watching a repeat movie as I see South Africa slide deeper and deeper down. A sinking Titanic. In June 1998, I laid thousands of students from Unpleasant to Harare CBD, University of Zimbabwe students, on 2 June 1998, I was the president of the SRC in Harare. And our motto on that morning was Mugabe must go. We're chanting in the streets of Harare, 2nd Street Avenue, Mugabe must go. We initially wanted to demonstrate for our grants, for our payout, and we said our message is bigger than campus politics. Our message is a national crisis. And we used Mugabe must go as a slogan to emphasize the agents of the crisis. I just wanted to say something about that experience, because since 1998, I've never said Mugabe must go ever again. I was suspended by the University of Zimbabwe and given 8 disciplinary charges. The university was closed for 4 months. Graduation was delayed by a year. In that hour of confusion, students cried out to me and said, "Where's your leadership?" In my desperation, I called out to the Zimbabwe Congress of Trade Unions, Catholic Bishop Conference, all those big organizations in Zimbabwe that we have. And we were called to the Africa Synod House in Harare as student leaders to give our case to the rest of the civil society people. And I stood on behalf of the thousands of students who are now scattered all over the country after the police forced us out of the campus for saying Mugabe must go. That was our message. Mugabe must go. He's still here, as you know. One thing I see from the repeat movie is that the leaders, instead of encouraging us as students for standing up to Mugabe and his kleptocracy, they warned us that we're starting a fire that will not finish. One after the other, they said, "Students, you are young, you are immature, you don't know what you are dealing with. Mugabe is much more bigger than you think. And there will be a blood flow in Harare if you continue on this path. And we will not be able to account for the thousands of bodies that Mugabe and Uzudlams will create in this country." And they warned us to stop what we're doing. That's why from that day onwards, I said Mugabe must remain where he is until God calls him to heaven. You will never hear me say Mugabe must go. I'm just waiting for God to help him out of State House. Is there a lesson for South Africa? Because
no, there's no such a lesson.
I've been living in South Africa since 2004. Since 2004. And I was in Bulawayo last week. I spent a week in Bulawayo, and I want you guys to understand something important. You are in denial. That's the message you need to take home. You are in denial. Some of us here don't even have time to compare the history of Zimbabwe to South Africa, but take time to compare the rest of African history. You will see that you are in denial. This is a script, a repeat movie. Thank you. In terms of solution, someone said solution. In terms of solution, stop attacking each other, start confronting the crisis. And the crisis is that South Africa has no leadership and it needs a sense of vision. Like yesterday's budget, I always say to the Zimbabweans, you don't have a vision document, so you don't know where you are going to. South Africa says they are using the National Development Plan. If it was the National Development Plan, then the speech yesterday should have been word by word following the script to say, where are we at? What are we missing? What are the targets? So there is no vision right now. And where there is no vision, people get confused. We don't have a rallying point. Whether we're the opposition, we're like in a crisis management mode. And like Zimbabwe, you will continue to slide. You will continue. Zimbabwe is not going to be solved tomorrow because there is no plan. No plan. Nothing. No plan.
Thank you, sir.
Nothing.
My name is Tanu, the Sunday Times. Just one question for Mr. Vavi and Mr. Mbeki. Since you've worked close with President Jacob Zuma, just one question on the fact that is he a compromised or a president, or he's just incapable of understanding the consequences of his decisions? There seems to be parallel decisions from the NEC taking place. I mean, in 1 week, he managed to collapse the economy of the country, and NEC members didn't seem to have been included in that decision making. Is he incapable of understanding consequences of his decisions, or he's just a compromised president under this thing that they term state cap?
Thank you. We have one
Sorry,
woman
yeah, yeah. Hi, I'm Priya Rauji.
and one last person over there.
Okay, hi, I'm Priya Rauji, an alumni of the Wits Business School. My question is more related to a future perspective. So given that South Africa sent a delegation through to Davos, and we're getting all these best practices coming through from what it means to be living in the fourth industrial revolution. So just taking that into account, there's a few principles that I see coming through. The one is around creative destruction, which is exactly what the EFF is trying to achieve, where you're creatively trying to destroy what we perceive to be the authority at the moment. But what I do see coming out is just doom and gloom and negativity all the time. So my question to you is, if you had to reboot South Africa and restart, what would you do? What are the key things you would focus on? What would your ministries be? Like, for example, would you have a ministry of innovation? And what would South Africa 20 years down the line look like? And how do we start building up in order to achieve that?
Okay, I think we will stop there with the questions. They seem to be all or mostly directed at Zweli, so I'll let him go with it.
Daniel. I hear. Thank you very much, my comrade. I need that now. Where's Daniel now? Yeah, I agree a crisis. That's what my whole input this morning was about. And I agree about that we are in denial and that we're repeating the same script we've seen in Zimbabwe. And, but I only disagree with him on one thing. And that's a fundamental disagreement. He says, wait for a godly intervention. No, South Africans are not going to wait for a godly intervention to stop the slide. The 14,700 demonstrations a day, the fees must fall, the outsourcing must fall, the anti-corruption coalitions, the many other ETOLs, all of those initiatives are all initiatives that says we will not wait for God to intervene. Unfortunately, he has not intervened now. Mugabe is 93, and I don't know for how long you're going to have to wait. We can't wait for, no, we can't wait. We just not, it's not like us that we just wait for that. I'm sorry. So I agree with everything except that point. The point that makes me to say, however, in response to Daniel, which is my concluding remarks, and this is something I said elsewhere, that certainly South Africa is stuck. We are in a crisis. We're going nowhere. As I was saying, we are in a deepest ocean, directionless. No compass. Our captains have been blindfolded. But South Africa has not been broken. There is still hope that with everything that we have to our huge advantage, we can move the opposite direction of Zimbabwe. And what we need in this country more than anything else at this moment, at this dark hour, is courage. In particular from the good men and women that Nelson Mandela spoke about, that they exist in all corners of the society. The day we master that courage to say, not in our name, all of us, we will turn the direction towards the promised land. And that's what I think we need in conclusion. Secondly, Sunday Times, the president, I'm sorry I have to end on this rather a little bit negative. You're asking whether he is compromised and whether there is an incapacity inbuilt there. my view, and this is not a personal attack or anything. My view is that both. I have learned that the hard way. As one of his biggest supporters for many years, I have learned that he is too compromised to play a decisive leadership role, in particular in a struggle against corruption in South Africa. For example, when you're facing 783 charges and they have not been removed, you compromised. Because then when suddenly there is evidence emerging that almost every appointment is motivated by one consideration, I want people who will ensure that I never have to face those 783 charges. I'm prepared to pay 17.3 million rands in a golden handshake to remove a professional prosecutor like Ngasana in order to get some junior middle ranking official whose first task is to remove charges against somebody that the society perceive to be my friend, Nomgcobo Jiba. You compromised. When you remove a Hawks director, an MK cadre for that matter, and you offer him 3 million rands to go, when you appoint a police like the former one and the current one, and I'm going to have a press conference next week because I have now a forensic audit that shows that this himself is a compromised person. Perhaps that's why he is being appointed. When you go everywhere else in other state institutions, and that becomes the norm, is a talk to a compromised person. So that's what I'm saying. Secondly, incapacity, certainly yes. And in my view, the president does get good advice, including, I know as a matter of fact, he was advised to make a symbolic gesture on the question of payments in the wake of the damning public protector report. Comrades did say to him, please, it will do you a great favor. Pay, even if it's just a small amount, show that you consent. No. I'm assured of my unwavering support from my Sikopans. And then, a total collapse this week. The poor Nati and the Tulas Nlesi and Advocate Tihag all left hang up there dry. Completely humiliated forever. I don't know what they can ever say to anybody, including their own children in the future. And that's unfortunately the state of affairs. And that's the issue then about the issue of being compromised and also the issue of incapacity. Yesterday there was a good talk about we want to save, we want to address wasteful expenditure, we're cutting costs and all of that. Good stuff, because that's inspired surely by what we're seeing happening in Tanzania. We're inspired by what is happening in Tanzania. But in South Africa, who will believe that? Who will believe that? You spend 250 million in your own house, you do nothing about it, you allow a minister to upgrade his fence, things that are happening in this country, for 16 million rands. And you spend 34 million rands in security upgrades in Cape Town. And then you turn around to the nation and say it's tough times, tighten your belts, and please save. We want to address wastefulness in the government. Who believes that? And that's the issue of moral authority. that I was speaking about. The president, unfortunately, have no moral authority to talk to us about savings or wasteful expenditure. He doesn't. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim. Well, before I thank our panelists and Wits Business School, I must say I've been told to spend 5 minutes making closing remarks. Now I'm very nervous about this free license that I have been given here. I might misuse it. But anyway, one comment I want to make in connection with SONA, do with the health. Yes, the president did say life expectancy has increased from wherever to wherever. And, but the one very crucial omission, he didn't say, first, why did it decline? And secondly, why did it go up? The key information that was held back was that the ANC government was party to the decline in life expectancy in the way it managed HIV/AIDS. First, secondly, why it started going up was because of the Treatment Action Campaign and the Constitutional Court. But he is claiming credit for the government. But those are the people, and Zweli was one of the main supporters as General Secretary of COSATU for the Treatment Action Campaign, and there were many other governments who supported the Treatment Action Campaign. So even the one statistic that we were given was we were only given half of the story. So that's one part. The second comment I want to make is about the underperformance of the ANC government. To me, I think there's one word that we have to always keep in mind, which is competition. If you look at our top teams in the world, in this country, we have the Springboks and we have the Proteas. They are amongst the top 3 teams in the world rankings. Why are they there? It's because they compete with the best in the world, which is other cricket teams, global cricket teams, and other global rugby teams like the All Blacks. Our team at the bottom of the world and African ratings are Bafana Bafana. Why? Because they compete amongst themselves. And if you try and watch the PSL leagues, well, you will be in tears by the time they finish. So there is no real competition. They are not competing. They always fail in Africa. They are not competing with the African teams. And that is one of the curses of South Africa, lack of competition. Now, today, we see this lack of competition, the consequences of it in our politics. There is no competition in our politics. This point has been made very strongly that the opposition needs to be stronger to the ruling party. How this is to happen, well, we haven't had the time to go into it, but we need more competition in our politics if we're going to overcome corruption. Corruption is cost-free in South Africa. All you have to say, you spend 2 years telling the public protector, no, I'm not paying you back. And then when the 2 days before the hearings of the Constitutional Court, you say, I will pay. So let me walk away from this whole situation. But if there were real political competition in our political system, there would be a cost to corruption. Today, for the ruling party, there is no cost to corruption. So we can demonstrate, we can scream, we can shout. So the challenge which I think the panelists have thrown up to all of us is we have to participate in creating real political competition in our political environment in this country. So those are my 5 minutes worth of comments. I now have to call upon Wits Business School, where are you rooted, to come and say a few words. But before she comes, I have to finish my part. She takes over from now. I really can't thank the panelists enough for the work that they have done. This about 10 o'clock last night. So you must have had sleepless nights trying to disentangle what was right and what was wrong with it. But thank you very much, everybody, and thank you, panelists. So over to you.
So ladies and gentlemen, let's give our panel members a round of applause. I thought they were very brave. Thank you so much. So on behalf of the Wits Business School, we have a token of appreciation for each panel member. Mr. Mbeki, thank you for moderating our session. Mr. Vavi, you were very brave. Thank you for your frank input. We really appreciated it. Professor Boysen, thank you so much for being on our panel.
Thank you.
Ms. Mbete, thank you so much for being here. And last but not least, Mr. Khumalo, power to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you'll be able to join us on the 26th of February. Save the date, we'll be having a post-budget speech analysis and insights panel discussion. You'll see the information on our website by the end of the day. Thank you for coming, and keep well.
That was great. Thank you. Thank you.
Hey, it was.
Thank